Hi, I'm Troy. I'm the founder and managing director of Increasio. I'm here today with Andy Farrell, who is our head of digital strategy and UX. We wanted to have a discussion about mobile applications and how they can operate in today's environment. We have a lot of clients today that have been asking us around mobile technologies and how we can use them and what the barriers to entry are and how we might move forward. Andy?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. A lot of people do ask about mobile, and their assumptions around whether mobile makes sense sometimes are pretty well founded in terms of what the challenges are. So there's kind of four big things that we've uncovered that are stopping people from taking advantage of native mobile technology. And of course, the first big thing is cost.
Yeah.
The fact that you've actually got to develop an app for iOS, for Android, and you've still got to have a solution that's going to work on your desktop.
Yes.
So that's a big obstacle. Second thing is native mobile apps are opaque in terms of whatever you put in them is not easily discovered. It's not indexed by search engines. You can't easily link to it.
So you can't see the content inside the app unless you're in the app.
Exactly. Third problem is getting people to onboard, getting people to actually install your app is a big challenge. There's quite a few steps, obviously, to installing an app. Sometimes people think twice. They might be reluctant because of the size of the app.
Yeah.
The permissions the app is asking for when it first launches, and just getting somebody through all the hoops from, say, a social media post through the App Store to the point where they're actually installing can be really high friction.
Yeah.
So that's a big drop-off point. And the fourth thing is, as is the case with so many things these days, you're constantly changing and updating it, and when you're talking about updating a native app that's on the App Store, that means going back through that whole process all over again, which could mean you're triggering the review process by, say, Apple, and that can take time, and sometimes it's a bit unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly. Rejected.
How long? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So all these things combine to make mobile somewhat broken in terms of the typical needs of a company that's trying to move quickly and yet take advantage of the mobile platform.
Yeah.
So, which is why most people have opted for a responsive website.
Yep. It's much more efficient, much cheaper.
But not such a great experience.
Yeah.
So, and therein lies the problem. So, mobile apps are great. We know everybody loves using them.
So what sort of uptake do you have in a mobile app? How many people are using apps? How many apps do people engage with on an ongoing basis?
So your average user has about 35 apps installed on their phone.
Yep.
In terms of how many apps they're actually using on a regular basis, though, that's a whole different story. Yeah. So, often people have multiple apps installed from a particular category, but they may actually only really be using one of those frequently, or maybe a couple.
A handful. Yeah.
So again, this is a little bit of a friction point, but people do love using apps, and the reasons for that are pretty obvious.
Yeah. So, is there a way then that we can sort of meet in the middle between a responsive website and a native app? Like, is there a middle ground, or is there any solutions in place out there that can, I guess, have the best of both worlds?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and I think you've used the exact right term there, talking about this middle ground. There is a gap in the middle, definitely. And it's the difference between the great experience you can have with a native mobile app versus the typical responsive website, which is, it often feels good at first, but as you use it, you start realizing, well, it's really just a website. It doesn't really behave.
There's limitations.
Yeah, in a it's way. So it's a bit of a mixed experience. So there is this gap in the middle, and that gap has been filled, which is really interesting, by a new technology called a progressive web app.
Yeah.
So this is basically taking some of the technologies that we use to build responsive websites, and also leveraging some new things that have come along, some new technologies that are available in the browser. And we're able to now deliver an experience that starts to look a lot more like a native app, but is built using the same technologies we've been using to create websites.
So that would mean then you would do away with some of the limitations around apps, because if it's built with the same technologies of websites, you're then going to have content that's discoverable but living within an app.
Yeah, so PWAs have a number of really specific advantages over a responsive website. So the P in the PWA is progressive. So the app progressively becomes more like a native app in terms of the experience.
Yeah.
And so if we look at what is that experience, what specifically does it solve? So the first thing is unlike a native app where we've got all those obstacles to getting people into the app, we can link directly to a PWA just like a website.
Okay.
So I can now put a post on social media with a URL, and when people jump into that URL, they're actually
In the app.
they're in the app. And so that means you can effectively use the app first and then decide to install it later.
Yeah.
So that's the second thing, is unlike a responsive website, it can be installed. And once you do that, once the icon appears on your device, it will then launch and behave and enjoy the same kind of status as a native app.
So you can get things like push notifications
Yeah.
directly to your app.
That's right, and it works offline. So
Okay.
it launches almost instantly. It'll work offline, and the technology now has moved to the stage where the actual user experience, so the way the interface works, the kinds of transitions and effects that we can provide, are as fluid as a native app. And in fact, it's almost indistinguishable
Yeah.
to most people that they're not using a native app.
Okay, so are there many cases where this is being used in the wild already?
There's a whole bunch, and it's interesting who's giving them a try. And I think one of the big advantages too is that, and the reason that people have gone down this road is now they only need to build one app, and they can deliver a native app-like experience to iOS, Android, and on the desktop
So
with one build.
So there's a massive cost saving then in the development of the technology and ongoing maintenance?
So the cost would be comparable with building a single native app for one platform plus a little bit more, as opposed to the triple cost you typically face with building
Website.
Android, iOS, and a desktop. So
Okay.
it's still a complex app to build, but the end result basically solves three problems.
Yeah. So what technologies does it typically involve, or is it wide and varied as how progressive web apps are built?
So there's a couple of new things that a progressive web app is taking advantage of. One is a thing called a manifest, and this basically tells the device how that app will behave when it's installed and when it launches. So it tells us things like the icon, the splash screen, the name, and so on. So that is what makes the app installable. The second really exciting thing is a thing called a service worker, and this is basically something that can run behind the scenes even when the app's not being used and do things. And it can also manage things like caching, which is where we start to get some of the offline capabilities from.
And performance and speed, etc.
So, unlike a responsive web app where you typically need to be connected to a server to do anything, with the help of a service worker, once you've been to the app once, the subsequent experience is really super fast. And we can do updates in the background, so the user is not really aware of the fact that we're fetching fresh content at some point. That just happens kind of behind the scenes. So that's part of how we create a great experience. In terms of your question about who's using them, so the kinds of uses that we're typically seeing is where an organisation might already have a native app and they've got a responsive web alternative that's not a great experience, and they're trying to figure out how to get more traction in that space, or maybe how to onboard people into their native app. Or in some cases, perhaps replacing the responsive website is providing everything they need in terms of the experience. So some really good examples. Twitter have got they've taken their mobile web app and turned it into, their M site. So their responsive website and turned it into a progressive web app. Pinterest is another big one. AliExpress, their shopping app.
So is there any performance increase that we're seeing from people who are moving from a responsive website into a progressive web app? I guess not only just performance for as far as speed, but are we seeing an increase in conversion metrics around increase in sales, increase in number of sign-ups to newsletters, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we have. Both in terms of audience engagement and when you look at some of those other metrics like sales and ad click-throughs and so on, what we're seeing is there's a reported uplift across the board. So a few specific numbers. With AliExpress, they saw a 74% increase in the amount of time people are actually spending on the shop, twice as many pages being visited overall, and 104% increase in conversions, which is huge.
A massive increase to the bottom line.
That's a massive increase. Forbes is another great example. So they had a 43% increase in the number of user sessions, 100% increase in engagement across the board, 6 times more articles actually looked at.
Wow.
during the user experiences. Similarly with Pinterest, 60% increase in user engagement, 44% increase in ad revenue. So these are pretty compelling numbers.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty fair to say that the experience is a big enough improvement that it really is no longer comparable with just having a responsive website.
Yeah.
This is really going to the next level.
Yeah.
And it's much more similar to having a native app in terms of the increase in engagement you get at a much lower investment.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got some big businesses starting to use this technology. Does it make sense for everyone? Or is it a really limited use case of companies that might look to use this technology?
Yeah, look, that's a good point. It doesn't make sense for everybody.
Yeah.
The kinds of people that see the most benefit, the sorts of businesses that are pursuing this, are ones where they re-engage with their customers frequently. So whether it's just a one-off visit and a sale of some kind, or it's a single service that you're offering and once they use it, that's it. It doesn't make so much sense.
Yeah.
But if you have an audience that are re-engaging with your brand, they're coming back to reorder products, or there's a service that perhaps they use from time to time, or perhaps there's information that they need to view frequently, it makes a lot of sense. Because you can provide a way better, way more fluid experience that's much more engaging and much more enjoyable to use.
Yeah, and you have multiple ways to get them back in to engage with your website app.
Well, and the fact that it integrates with your overall digital marketing much more tightly, that's probably the most compelling.
So you could send an email marketing campaign which drives someone to a specific page within your app, which you can't do within a native app.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.